Hey guys, so in today's video, if you couldn't tell by the title, I wanted to share some tips that I used to help in my work as a special education paraprofessional. There were some students in the ECSE setting that I worked in who were considered nonverbal or very minimally verbal, who some of them just had a difficult time communicating. And so I thought that I would share some tips for ways to make communication with people who are nonverbal, especially particularly students, um, how to make things a little bit easier as far as communication goes. So if you see me looking down, I do have my phone. I made some notes just so that I could remember everything that I needed to remember that I wanted to share with you guys. So the number one tip that I have is using visual tools. So this could be like pec boards or picture boards, picture cards. Like when I was in the ECSE setting, we had these little Velcro things where it would be first a picture of like first toilet, then play, or first snack, then play, or first work, then play, something like that. And we had pictures of the activities that they needed to do first. So hopefully that makes sense. Um, they can also use like a pegboard or something like that to show, like if you ask them what they need and you show them the picture or the board, they can point to what it is that they need. This might be different based on the abilities of whatever student you're working with. So some students may not be able to point out exactly what it is that they need. They might not understand what it is that they need. So you're going to have to go through on an individual case by case basis and figure out the best way to communicate with your student or with whatever student you're working with. Another visual tool would be schedules and charts. So, visual timetables or visual cues that can help to show the student what the routine is. So, for one of the students, we had like a little strip. So, we would have like in order what they needed to do for the like day by day. So, um, we would usually have like reading, math, recess, things like that, like in a list in order of the ways that things went for their particular general education teacher. We didn't really use the visual schedules and charts and things like that in the special education room. So, like when we were working on finishing homework or finishing schoolwork or classwork that that particular student was unable to complete in class, we would bring him or her back to the ECSE classroom and work in there with them on that. So we didn't really use a schedule or charts in there. You can also use gestures and or demonstrations. So as you're speaking the instructions, you can use a demonstration to show them what it is that you want them to do. Hopefully that makes sense. So then they're better able to understand what it is that you're trying to get them to understand. Um, the next thing that I have after visual tools is incorporate assistive technology. So there is technology. Again, this is going to depend on the abilities of your students, the age, the things that they have been taught how to do. So there are tablets, there are speech generating devices, there are certain apps that can help communicate. I did not particularly or specifically, not particularly, I did not specifically work with any students who used assistive devices because most of the students that I worked with were very young. And so they hadn't really been taught to use any of these communication devices or things like that. We mostly used the little Velcro charts that I've shown you guys in previous videos, as well as like pec boards and things like that. Um, Typing or writing tools, again, if the student is able to write or type, they can express themselves through text. If they're not verbally able to communicate, um, I didn't actually work with any students that were able to do that either because, again, most of the students I worked with were between the ages of 3 and 5. Um, Another way, like the next way that you can help or another tip is to encourage nonverbal expression. So, encouraging them to use body language, observe and respond to gestures, facial expressions, and other physical cues. Sign language, if the student knows sign language and you are able to communicate with them in sign language, using sign language can definitely help. Um, Another way that I don't think that most people would understand is a communication aspect, but giving them a choice. So presenting options to the students, and letting them point or gesture their preference for options. It also helps to make them feel like they are a little bit in control of what happens with them if they are able to make these choices themselves, and it gives them a chance to learn what a good decision is and what a bad decision is, or what a better decision is if they're both good options. Another tip I have is to create a supportive and or trusting environment. So build trust with the student. Obviously, that is going to be a day by day thing, but they need to be able to trust you in order to be able to establish a better level of communication with them. Provide time for them to figure out the best way to communicate with you. Um, Rushing a student who has difficulties communicating or rushing someone who has special needs can sometimes create outbursts. And that's the last thing you want to do, because that is going to make communication with that particular person much more difficult. Another thing to do is minimize distractions. So, if you are working on something and you need them to complete it, you need to try to minimize the amount of distractions, especially if you want to communicate or need to communicate something to them. It's best if you're in an area where the least amount of distractions possible will happen. The last thing that I have here is engaging with them through activities. So, interactive play or art like drawing, building, sensory activities, things like that, can also help build an environment for communication. Role playing or storytelling, using role playing games to encourage interaction and developing or helping to develop their ability to express themselves and or communicate, that is more of like teaching them communication. I noticed through this, we had students who were considered nonverbal at the beginning of the school year who started to develop certain words or incorporate certain words into their expression and into their language. And it was not like what you would expect as far as like me talking to you level of communication, but they were able to start saying certain things as you built it into a routine. Um, Group participation, like group work, encouraging them to interact with their peers and like other students, can also help them work on social skills as well as communication. And sometimes you will need to make sure, especially with younger children who may not have the social skills developed quite yet, you may want to just make sure that you're there to make sure they're making appropriate um, choices. Like, pushing is not like, it is a form of communication for a lot of students who are nonverbal at that age. Like pushing or grabbing things, they don't understand the boundaries of certain behaviors. So you have to make sure that you are there to help them learn that there are boundaries, help them learn what is important, what is proper etiquette as far as communication, which behaviors are acceptable and allowed, and which ones aren't. Hopefully that made sense. So, yeah, if you guys are curious about any other tips, I am more than willing to share any tips that I come across or that I can think of and remember that I used to help me in my work as a special education paraprofessional. If there's any topics you would like me to discuss on my channel in the future, please let me know. I'd be glad to get something filmed for you. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below. I will either respond in written form or most likely make a video about it. I do apologize that you will probably have to wait for me to respond to your comment. It may be a little bit just because I am behind in posting content, quite behind. So I do apologize for that, but I will get to it as soon as I can. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you found it helpful, and let me know. And I'll talk to you guys in my next video.